Hey ARKS Silhouette coming to you fresh off the heels of the PSO2 New Genesis Prologue 2 broadcast this morning with some fresh takes and new information to break down. This video is going to be a quick one, so don't worry too much about getting settled in. There's a bit of old information to kind of go over and some new awesome things that have been revealed to us, and if you want to get a quick summary of what we've got in store, then stick with me for just a little bit longer and we'll get you the rundown. First off, the New Genesis closed beta for Global has formally been announced, and we are encouraged to keep our eyes on the official @PlayPSO2 social media accounts for further information. Furthermore, a number of PSO2 Global streamers were lucky enough to bypass the lottery for the JP closed beta test 2 and were invited to participate in it formally. Now I know what you're thinking. Silly, is it true? Did you get invited? No, I'm a peasant like the rest of you. But I did get very lucky and found a golden ticket. All jokes aside, congratulations to everyone who made it in, invite or otherwise. I look forward to seeing you there. As for content for NGS specifically, enemies. After a bit of banter with the host, we got our first bit of information, mostly going over stuff we already kinda knew from the previous closed beta test, going over the various categories of enemies, and giving us some formal descriptions of how they act, their special qualities, and their behavior. For example, with the dolls, we were formally introduced to the Bujin, a small, nimble creature that can attack with its clones when its health gets low, as well as the Daytil Sword, which are giant doll enemies that we've seen in previous footage and the first closed beta test. Attacking their feet knocks them over, and you can attack their weak point after that. It was sort of hinted that there might be variants of the Daytils, but mum's the word on that for now, unless you count some of the bigger enemies. Formers is the official designation for enemies that resemble counterparts in PSO2 Classic, such as the Rock Bear and Banzer lookalikes we had seen in the closed beta test prior to now. Formally introduced, the Crag Bear is a tougher cousin of the Rock Bear, able to create shockwaves with its bare fists and grab players out of the air and throw them like some kind of pro wrestler, even more so than it was before. While the footage we've seen in the past, they are surprisingly agile enemies and they are a blast to fight. They will keep surprising you time and time again. The Ard Banser and the Ard Banshee are the returning Banser species and have familiar howling and beam attacks, although they seem to be wind element this time around by the looks of things. It is currently unknown if Formers will include other updated versions of PSO2 Classic enemies, even though my money's kinda on that, or if this is just the designation for Sylvants, Navarian Sylvants in particular. Alters are the curious critters we've heard tell of in the previous closed beta test again, that change their appearance and behavior at night, possibly under other circumstances, generally becoming stronger and starting to do new things. We were introduced to the Chiacurio, which resembles a sea slug or a sea angel or something like that, which floats about whimsically and buffs other enemies, providing our mutual foes with techers of their very own, as it were. And then the Wallon, a sinister-looking creature with very sharp hands. Probably stabs you a bunch and sends out little waves of energy. He's gonna be a little guy. Previous watchers of my streams probably know I was rather worried about the field capacity for players and was exceptionally concerned with NGS turning out to be a mostly empty world, or rather the possibility of it. I'm sure they're doing what they can. As it turns out, the Phantasy Star team has heard our prayers. They've heard mine specifically. They called me out by name. That's not true. And have formally revealed that exploration areas will be able to contain up to 32 players at once, as opposed to combat-specific areas which will have a cap of 8 still. Who knows, we could see this still change down the road, and personally I would really like it to. I know that there's gotta be a limit somewhere, but I'd just like to see more, and the more you can pack in would be great. But hey, it's a start, and it shows that SEGA is listening and really putting in the effort to kind of make it across to us and hear our concerns, and that's great. Great work, and thanks a lot, you guys at SEGA. In these exploration areas specifically, there are rare, usually large variants of monsters called dread enemies, which are sort of like a world boss or guardian of different exploration areas. They oftentimes have a very archaic, very ancient appearance. They have a very stone complexion with like moss growing over them and things like that. They're much harder than their normal counterparts, and who knows about what they might drop, loot, and all that stuff. One of the ones we were especially presented by the host was something called the Gigantics, which seems to be an even rarer variant of Dread enemies. It almost seemed like it was kind of like its own creature at first, but then they specifically said a Gigantics form of the Daytail Sword, so that could possibly mean that there are other Gigantics monsters out there. It's a very large Gigantamax Pokemon form of the previous creature, as you can see in some of these screenshots. It's a very large, huge, big boss monster of the fields. And it kind of reminds me of, back in the day, hunting Leaping Lizzie back in Final Fantasy XI, if you ask me. I wonder if he drops fancy boots. Who knows? He's a very big Leaping Lizzie, and apparently he's very tough. According to the hosts back in the first closed beta test, only 17 of them were ever defeated, and this was the closed beta test where we had all the in-game players from PSO2 Classic come over. So that goes to show it's a very tough, it's either very tough or very rare, or possibly both. So it's something that to look forward to there. As far as we know, it kind of only appears under very specific conditions. You're probably not going to see it right away when you first run out into the field, and if you do, you might want to run. It's very dangerous. Definitely interesting stuff, especially if unique drops can be gotten from it. I know I'm actually going to be trying hunting it. If I can find it, it'll be great. Anyways, moving on to the next section. As for cosmetics, the broadcast announced that cast parts and outerwear, which were previously individual items and would easily clog up your storage. I know. I have 400 slots of premium storage filled with outerwear specifically, and they're now going to be ticket items, much like hair, accessories, face paint, eyes, you name it. This is probably, and basically is, a large quality of life feature. It's going to make it a lot easier on your storage. However, this is notable because it's also going to probably see these items and their value increase dramatically in the future. As you've seen in PSO2 Classic Global, a lot of items that are ticket-based, because of their consumable nature, they are very valuable. They're very affected by the inflation of Meseta. Who knows how that's going to go? You only need one of them this time around, I believe, is what we previously established, so maybe it won't be that bad. We'll see. A new form of layer wear was introduced called setwear, which occupies the same layer as base wear. The difference being that when you have setwear on, you can't use it with outerwear. There is not a real big example of what that means, anything that was shown off to kind of point it out or anything. It's just, this is a new thing. And it looks like it's covering the bases for some kind of variant base wear that just doesn't have outerwear in the future. Who knows? Maybe it does some fancy stuff. That unfortunately remains to be seen. Weapon camos can be equipped individually to each weapon type. We knew that from the first closed beta test, but hey, always good to hear it made it through as well. And I'm looking forward to that myself. Here's hopefully we get to use some of our awesome camos from PSO2 Classic and bring them over and just equip all of them at once. It's going to be great. Next, one of the bigger things that we got here were some information on player stats and equipment. Some of this is old news, but we'll go over everything just in case. Subclasses are going to work slightly differently than in PSO2 Classic, but mostly will be the same. One of the biggest differences being that their stats will not affect the main class at all. As before, all PAs and techs are available from subclasses that you have equipped, but unlike in PSO2 Classic, the weapons are too. So you don't have to get an all-class weapon, you can just equip every weapon, so it's great. As long as the weapon is in your subclass at least. At least that was the implication here. Some class skills carry over and affect the main class, kind of like what we're already doing in PSO2 Classic, so not too much has changed there, with the exception that, hey, you don't get your stats from your subclass, and you do get the weapons from it, so that's nice. One other big thing about your character and how he levels up. Skill points were previously gained at each level up in PSO2 Classic. They will not be in New Genesis. We kind of already knew this from the closed beta test, but, hey, going over it again. Basically, skill points are gotten from completing cocoons, which are like these, you've seen them, they're little shrine-like areas in the field that you'll find that have specific objectives in them. It'll be an interesting experience, for sure. The other new thing is Limit Break. A lot of people were comparing this to Final Fantasy VII and all that good stuff. It's very fun. Limit Break is basically, it's kind of roughly the new equivalent of weapon extension, in the sense that you can use it to power up and level up weapons of lower rarity to keep them competitive with higher rarity weapons. The important thing to note here is we don't know to what ultimate extent and exact capacity that is being done in. We don't know if there's ultimately going to be a limit or if it's always going to be constant. If your 1-star weapon will always be as good as a 4-star weapon, who knows, if you do it enough. Or if it's going to be something like weapon extension was back in PSO2 Classic, where you can do that, but they're going to have some side effects, which in PSO2 Classic was having a massive amount of damage variance. So it's definitely something to look at. We'll see. But it's nice to know, because the potential for carrying your weapons over from PSO2 Classic, like say your Jupiter Tullus, and getting that leveled up and carrying it all the way through the end of the game it's at least being put on the table. We don't know. We'll see. Last but not least, we had Battle Power, which has been formally mentioned. We kind of saw a little bit of this in the closed beta test, but it's basically gear score. It's not exactly only about your weapons and augments and stuff like that, but it measures everything that affects your combat prowess, your combat ability, all of your stats, your augments, your weapons, your units. Well, I guess there's no units, but everything that could possibly be affecting your ability in combat is basically compiled into one metric, and that is your battle score. Your battle power, rather. It's important to note because this will gate content later. It also ultimately basically just summarizes your true capability in a word. So it's going to be definitely something you need to power up a little bit. It's going to ultimately be, instead of having you have to be X level to qualify for things, you might have to have X battle power. So definitely something to keep in mind. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And the big thing everybody's been waiting for, new weapons. We have new weapons! New weapons, or more specifically, old weapons that are new. The 6 known classes at this time, Hunter, Fighter, Ranger, Gunner, Force, Techer, all received their remaining weapons from PSO2 Classic, confirming that classes will be able to use multiple weapons henceforth. In summary, the Hunters have received the Partisan and the Wired Lances, which have been stylishly reworked. We saw a lot of stuff of them using Volcraptor with the Partisan, as well as some new fancy flying moves with the Wired Lances, grappling people, pulling yourself towards them. It's going to be interesting to see how that works. Let's see. The Fighters have gotten their Twin Daggers and Double Sabers, and according to the comments on the video, maybe the chat there, are unofficially the successor of both the Phantom and Etwall classes at the same time. Very interesting. Rangers received the Launcher, which has some interesting new behavior, with tracking bullets of some kind and a couple of new PAs, also borrowing what looks to be the satellite cannon from the rifle in PSO2 Classic. And finally, Forces and Techers have received the Talus, which has probably undergone the biggest reworking of all, but ultimately seems to have left some fans divided in the stream regarding its stationary nature. You know, it's going to be something you have to get out there and you have to try. Still, it's very interesting because if you want to make a turret, if you want to be the engineer from Team Fortress 2, this is your weapon. It'll be interesting to play with and see how that goes. All of the new weapons look gorgeous, even if I'm a bit sad that there's still no news on the Bouncer or the Soaring Blades, but hey, I'm going to personally go and immediately play Fighter and then branch into Force in order to appease my Etwall sensibilities. But I'm sure you've got some ideas too. Aside from a bit of friendly and fun host banter and a couple other things they mentioned, this was basically everything that we covered in the Prologue 2 broadcast that was pertinent to NGS and what you're probably looking forward to. There was a lot of fun moments between the hosts and everything in between as well, and SEGA provided some excellent post-production translation so everyone can enjoy the event even across the pond here, as it were. I encourage you to go back and check it out for yourself if you haven't yet. And that's everything, guys. NGS draws ever closer, more and more is being revealed to us as time goes on. And the JP Closed Beta Test 2 will be starting later tonight at midnight Central Standard Time. Did you get what you were hoping for in this broadcast? Anything you're particularly excited for? Let me know in the comments below. I enjoy bantering with you guys. Also, if you feel like it, give this video a like and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in more coverage. I'm trying to get back into the habit of putting up these videos, but I've been hard at work with some of the new content, and I've just been trying to get it all together and release it all at once before settling back into a loop. If you're interested in seeing the closed beta test 2 tonight, I'll be streaming it over on Twitch at twitch.tv/sillygames. Hope to see you there. Take care, guys. This is Silhouette, and I'm signing off. May you have all the rare drops.